I find myself learning the art of losing every day. Losing my bearings, losing objects, losing sleep, but mostly losing memories. That's a quote from the movie Still Alice, and it describes the lived experience of someone who has Alzheimer's disease dementia. Every 3 seconds, someone somewhere in the world develops dementia. Now, I'm very aware that I'm talking at a youth event, and that might seem very far away for some of you, given that dementia is associated with older age. However, there is a substantial proportion of people who will develop young onset dementia, and that is people in their 40s, 30s, and sometimes even in their 20s. Further, we know that Alzheimer's disease occurs 20 years before symptoms, such as forgetfulness, takes root. And even if you don't have dementia today, and you may never develop dementia, you probably know someone who is affected by it. And for me, this is personal. My granny, pictured here on my wedding day, spent most of the later years of her life living with Alzheimer's disease. And when we think more broadly across neurodegeneration and neuropsychiatric conditions of the central nervous system, this problem snowballs. We in CNS experience the highest failure rates whenever we think about taking drugs through clinical development. For drugs that show preclinical promise, so by the time they get through clinical trials with humans, just 6.7% of those will actually become a medicine. Just 6.7% of all the drugs that start with strong preclinical promise make it through to humans for medicines. Why is that? Is it that they're bad drugs? Well, probably not entirely. There is also a measurement issue. And so we experience issues such as translational problems. We don't have good tools that take us from animal research to humans. They're very complex whenever we think of the brain, with overlapping symptoms. And further, when you think about measuring the brain, it's typically done once every 6 months in a hospital. And if it's not a brain scan, it's probably an interview with a clinician, and it's very subjective. It's fair to say central nervous system therapy development today has a measurement problem. This is just an example of that. And so there's a lot of detail on this slide. We don't need to get into it. But what I want you to observe is that for Alzheimer's disease on the left and for psychiatry on the right, the circles represent different conditions, and the boxes within are the different symptoms associated with those. And you can see there's a lot of overlap. It's not distinct. And so if you're just measuring one thing, it could be due to this condition, could be due to another condition. It's problematic measuring the brain. But there's hope. New technologies are changing the landscape. And so today's theme is about creating ripples, and I'm going to talk about waves, specifically brain waves. These are two brainwave recording setups behind me here. I'm pictured in one. And so brainwave recording, that is called EEG, or electroencephalography. And essentially what that is measuring voltages at the surface of the scalp, which can tell us a little bit about what the brain is doing underneath. Neurons firing, and that's what we measure. It's non-invasive, you measure at the level of the scalp. And it's a really useful translational tool. So audience, which setup do you think is useful, or do you think you could use at home without a clinician? Anyone want to say? Yes, of course. It is the sleeker one on the left. So the one on the right is what I affectionately like to call the spaghetti monster. Because you can see all the strings and the wires coming out. And it has multiple channels. It's a wet gel sensor. So each of those little channels has to be filled with a wet gel. There are many of them. It takes a while to set up. And if you have long hair like me, you have to wash your hair afterwards. So it takes a while after as well. And you'll even see some of the sensors are on my face stuck on. Contrast that, and this setup is typically used in a hospital, it's in research clinics, but contrast that with the sleek option on the left. That is a Cumulus dry EEG headset. It's FDA 510K cleared. Reduced number of sensors, but they're dry sensors, so you don't have to wash your hair afterwards. You can put it on, and within a few minutes, you're recording your brain activity. Now, there are compromises that we do make. As I said, less sensors, also less experimental control at home, but more data in aggregate is more powerful than one single assessment. It's not just brainwaves we can record at home, we can also record cognition. And so again, looking at recording multimodally, we want to look at what's the brain doing, but the headset connects via Bluetooth to a tablet, a mobile tablet. And you'll see in that tablet, it's presenting tasks to the user. These are measuring important cognitive functions, such as executive function, attention, memory. But importantly, they are in a fun, engaging skin for the user. You'll see this person is shooting aliens and astronauts. There's also a Scrabble-looking tablet interface. And together, we're starting to build up a bigger picture. What is the brain doing? And what is the downstream behavior as a result at home? And underpinning all of that is a cloud-based infrastructure. So we can take advantage of Bluetooth connections from the headset to the tablet, the internet to upload the data, and cloud-based infrastructure to make sense of this data, to collect it, to store it, and to visualize it in almost real time coming across the globe. So that's really exciting. We can potentially do that. But the next question is, okay, so what? Why record every day? How often do you need to do it? Well, that means we can capture, if we do it frequently, people on a good day. Maybe they've had their caffeine in the morning, they had a good night's sleep, feeling confident, but we can also record people on a bad day when maybe they were a bit stressed, and that could happen if someone's coming into a hospital, they're in a new place, they're a bit worried, but we can also get them in all the days in between. Good day, bad day, and everything in there. And that gives us a more robust measure of someone's brain activity and cognitive function over time. So great, we can do it, but is the data any good? There's no point in recording it if it doesn't tell us something. And so you can see on the left-hand side, there's a very strong positive correlation between what we record digitally at home in terms of cognition against what we can record in the lab. And this was done in a group of Alzheimer's disease patients. We did a study called CNS 101, and they used this platform at home over the course of 1 year. And we also got a group of healthy volunteers to do the same in this study. So we see a strong positive correlation between what we can record at home and what we record gold standard in the lab. And then we also were able to record their brainwaves, and you can see these on the screen as well to the right, the two plots to the right. And we can see these brainwaves. They have the right shape, they have the right pattern, and we call that morphology and topography, as what we would expect to see based on wet lab EEG. And so these measures are valid. And what myself and my co-authors reported is that frequent, at-home, multimodal measurements are more sensitive to progression than the gold standard. More sensitive to progression than the gold standard. That is so exciting for those of us, because what that means is if you're more sensitive to progression, you're also, it follows, more sensitive to detecting the effects of a treatment, to inform clinical trials and to improve on the medicines that we have today. Every 3 seconds, someone somewhere in the world develops dementia. My granny was in that statistic. But our hope is that for most of you in this room, by the time you get to that stage, we will have had innovations in digital measurement, innovations in technology, some of which I can't even begin to imagine today, perhaps some that you will get involved in, that will actually help us make better medicines and get them to patients who desperately need them.